All right, this is going to be an interesting one. This is an interview from Joe Rogan and Blaire White on the Joe Rogan podcast. If you don't know Blaire White is a trans person. If you don't know Joe Rogan, welcome to the internet. He runs one of the most popular podcasts out there, and this is a conversation that they're having about their experience with DMT and other psychedelic drugs. So I'm just going to pause for a second there and say, hang in there with me. Particularly my brothers and sisters from the Christian worldview side of things. Obviously, we don't condone drug use. But I think that this conversation is an important one to engage with. Because even though kind of on the surface, the conversation is about DMT and its use and what it did for them, underneath that, and I'm not trying to put words in their mouth, but underneath that is a very powerful conversation about transformation and transcendence and how we as people can access that transformation and that transcendence. So for me, that's my relationship with Jesus, the real person, Jesus. That is transformational and it is transcendent. So yes, the conversation is about DMT, and it's going to go on to a couple of other things. So hang in there with this conversation. The reason that we are here is to have good dialogue around meaningful things. So to do that, we often need to push past some of our own sensitivities and maybe even the things that might trigger us. So that's kind of a long intro. If you're still with me at this point, let's get into it.
Okay.
So since doing DMT, which I did it 2 weeks ago, I did it twice in 2 weeks, I had this overwhelming sense of some people do DMT and then they start seeing people as NPCs. I've heard that talked about. They start seeing people as these are not real people with souls, and that's strange to me.
Who said that?
I see it all the time. People's I've had friends that do it and they start seeing people as NPCs based on what kind of trip they had. If they saw the...
Yeah, be careful of, think about the fruit of what you're doing. And if people are taking this and seeing people as NPCs, non-playing characters, like people without souls and stuff like that, that's not a very good sign off the top. But
or didn't, if they just saw cool colors or didn't. And for me,
Wait a minute. So you're saying that if people have a DMT trip and they didn't see the elves, and they think of that person who had that DMT trip as an NPC?
As an NPC, you don't have a
tears.
soul because you didn't really connect with any beings. You just saw pretty colors, you had a very simple experience. You know what I mean? But I had the opposite from...
All people are equal. Just some people are more equal than others. So I'll stop interrupting. So.
After doing DMT, I see so much more humanity in everyone I'm around. I feel very changed after doing DMT. It's a very profound experience. Yeah. And I'm just noticing more things about people. I'm being more aware of their body language when they talk to me. And I think it was a very positive thing doing DMT. And my experience was the closest thing to a spiritual experience I've ever had, because I've never been a person that's been terribly connected to anything larger than me. I'd never been religious, never been spiritual, and I'd say it was the closest to a spiritual thing for me.
I think...
Sorry, I'm going to go back because I thought what Blaire was saying here was important. So I'm going to go back.
And my experience was the closest thing to a spiritual experience I've ever had, because I've never been a person that's been terribly connected to anything larger than me. I'd never been religious, never been spiritual, and I'd say it was the closest to a spiritual thing for me.
I think...
Yeah, so there's that sense of transformation. Never been a spiritual person. Now kind of am going, but the word connected. I've never felt connected. So that's the deeper part of the conversation that I'm talking about.
It is a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
I think it's an undeniably spiritual thing. That's the thing about it, is it forces you to think about love and connection and the bonds that people have with each other in a way that you don't get from anything else. The powerful experience of a transcendent psychedelic moment is it's not like anything else you experience in life, other than maybe a near-death experience.
Yeah.
But you could argue.
Yeah. So I would disagree with Joe at this point, because he's saying the only way you can have this powerful transcendent experience is through DMT, or I think they're talking about mushrooms and things like that. And I don't think if Joe takes a step back, I think he would realize that that's not true. There's lots of people who have powerful experiences outside of using DMT, whether they be religious experiences or near-death experiences. There's obviously more to it. Certainly, I would point to my relationship with Jesus. Again, I would point to the fact that I believe I've had a real connection to the resurrected person of Jesus. That's very real. That's very transformative, and it is transcendent in that. In a similar way, probably not the same as what obviously they're talking about through this, but
argue that they're the same thing. I know people that have.
Yeah. Okay. So they go to the near-death experiences. Listen to what Joe says, though. I thought
the powerful experience of a transcendent psychedelic moment is it's not like anything else you experience in life.
That's what we're talking
maybe like a near-death experience.
Yeah.
But you could argue that they're the same thing. I know people that have had near-death experiences that swear that it was like a DMT trip.
I'm sure, and I don't think it's confirmed, but people say that it's what happens when you legally die or medically die. It's like you have a DMT trip.
Yeah,
and I could see that.
But it's not confirmed. But there's a lot of there's a lot of evidence that points to that.
Okay, this is where I have to say I am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm like a coffee shop theologian at best. And I don't know much about DMT, but what I have read is, and I haven't gone into these articles enough to like look at how authoritative this person might be, but you look at some of the articles out there in medical journals and things like that, and you realize that yes, DMT is present in food and DMT is present in our bodies. Our bodies create this, but we usually metabolize it. So it's not creating any sort of psychedelic experience. But if this is true, then this is how God has made us. Again, I'm looking at this from a biblical Christian worldview. If this is true, this is how God has made us. And in those near-death experiences or in those experiences that people are having when they are dying, I think what they're talking about is that we stop metabolizing DMT. I have no idea if what I'm saying is actually true, so do your own research. But I think that's what they're pointing to, is that as people die, they tend to feel this like you're leaving your body and all those things that other people have said that they experience on DMT. So they're closely related. Obviously, one person is having them without taking DMT, without ingesting it on purpose for the purpose of the psychedelic experience. The other person is just experiencing these things, and it's possible because it's possible that that's happening because DMT is already present in our body. Again, not a scientist, so I'm gonna skip part of this because they're just gonna go in and talk about their experiences. And again, I'm not necessarily here to condone any of that. But the point I think that is important is, they both talk about their experiences with psychedelics as being meaningful because of what they learned. So again, the whole reason I'm putting this out here is to create meaningful dialogue. So people are saying, I'm hungry to learn more about life. I'm hungry to learn more about the world around me and who I am, and maybe even what happens after I die. People are hungry for that. They're turning to DMT and psychedelics. And my contention is that you don't need to turn to DMT and psychedelics. We need Jesus. That's who we need. And so that might sound like kind of just like a religious trope or something like that. It sounds like almost like a commercial, you just need Jesus or whatever. But I see people and their desire for that. And then I see what I have experienced in my relationship with Jesus. And I'm just saying, I don't need to take DMT. That's what I'm saying. All right, so I'm going to find this next part. Hang in there with me.
Have you ever heard the expression entheogen?
What's that?
That's what psychedelics are. I think if you Google the term entheogen, I think it's of God. I think that's something of God. That the idea is that these things are doorways to the divine. That there's really a place that you can go to, and you go through a chemical doorway in your mind, through things that exist on this earth that people have to share. They have to tell you about it, and they share them. And
I mean, I think at that point, I have to say that Jesus says that he is the door, right?
that through these experiences, you can transcend your time here on earth and get a perspective that's not available any other way. So entheogen means chemical substance, plant origin, ingested to produce an extraordinary sense of consciousness. Yeah, but what is the, if that's just the definition of it, but there's a root of the word.
The etymology?
Like, where does the word entheogen come from?
That's what we're looking for. We're looking for the etymology.
Because it means something.
Theo is definitely religious.
Yeah, it means something that has to do with God.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Full of God, inspired, possessed. That's it. So it translates.
There you go. For all my evangelical brothers and sisters out there, full of God, inspired, possessed. You're going to land on the word possessed, I'm sure. But again, and that might be true. I know that a lot of people will connect drugs, pharmacopoeia, that whole thing. And certainly, again, I'm not condoning this, but what I am saying is that people go to psychedelics. They are going to drugs for this connection that they feel. And that what Joe is pointing out is that this is like a spiritual or divine, or to be full of God is a very interesting phrase. Entheogen, to be full of God. Well, how do we become full of God? Is it through a chemical substance? And again, I think he says this again, like this is the only way. It's not the only way. There is one way. There is one way. And it's through Christ. That's what I understand. That's the thing that makes the most sense for me. And I will be honest with you all. Like, I am a skeptic. I have the heart of a skeptic. So yeah, are there times where I'm like, is this whole Jesus thing even real? Like, I've been a Christian for 20 plus years. And I feel like I'm scratching the surface of what that means sometimes. And so, yeah, I mean, my perspective on other people taking psychedelic drugs is going to be informed by my experience with Jesus. And I'm not, again, it just feels like such like a commercial. Like I'm saying, don't do drugs. You need Jesus. And I'm just saying, I don't think that this is a genuine connection to God. I'll just say that. And again, that's me being a skeptic, but also like putting my philosopher hat on and being willing to admit that I don't have the full picture. But I know that's not the only way, because I know, gosh, man, this is actually hard to communicate. So at this point, when I was recording, I really do struggle through how to communicate this. I'm leaving this in here because the last thing I want to do is to edit through and make it look like I'm smarter or I'm more prepared than I really am. Theology is difficult. It's not easy because we have finite minds and we're trying to grasp the infiniteness of God. So I'm going to leave this in here because of the fact that I want, if I'm going to create this channel, I want it to be a genuine exploration into the realm of theology. And as I come up against things that challenge me, I don't want to edit those out. So here it is. And this is where theology should be something that's done slowly and deliberately and considerate. Be careful of anyone saying that take this drug, it will give you this experience. Okay, pause. The reason I think this word entheogen is important is that it's pointing us to a deep need, a need to be filled with God. The question that lies before you today, the question that lies before me today is, how do you become full with God. Jesus is the door. Jesus is the only way. I'm going to tell you that because I'm coming at you from a biblical Christian worldview. I don't have the time to build the entire case for why I believe what I believe in this one video, but that's going to be the thing that I come at this from. Joe and Blaire are coming at this from the standpoint of psychedelics. And I would just be very cautious with anyone saying that if you put this chemical in your body, that it gives you this doorway for you to be filled with God. This other idea of being possessed should give you cause to pause a little bit. So, but you understand that deep down, this is what people are hungering for. And I think it's good to have this dialogue about these things. I think I'm going to skip a little bit here and find another part that I think is meaningful.
It's in English as full of God. So what is it from Greek? Yeah, it's from ancient Greek. That's what it is. That's a better word for these things than drugs. The problem with the term drug is it's a blanket term that you can use for caffeine. You use for nicotine. You use for alcohol. There's a lot of drugs. Yeah, adrenaline's a drug.
I agree.
And
meaningful conversations should take time. We should be considerate and we should be deliberate about how we have these conversations. And some of what I'm saying is off the cuff. So I will give you that. I might go back and rethink some of this. And I hope you will give me permission to do that, because I'll give you permission to do the same. You know, we always have permission to go back and change some of our beliefs and things like that. I'm pretty committed. I'm pretty committed to what I believe about Jesus. I believe Jesus is the only way. But again, building that case is a little bit difficult. Comparing the biblical Christian worldview that says Jesus is the door, Jesus is the only way, to a whole nother worldview that's drawing people into psychedelics because they desire a doorway is where we're at today. So
than this current experience thing that we must pay homage to, that we must give praise to, that we must feel the divine intervention of these other realms. And it just exists in all cultures, in all societies. And I think part of that is because there's moments in time where you recognize. And you could have these moments in time, whether it's the birth of a child, whether it's true love, whether it's just the bonding between friends in an incredible moment in life where you feel like you get just a chance for a second to peek your head through the clouds.
There's something more.
Yeah, and see that there's something more. And
there's something more. I don't need to repeat it, but this is why I felt like this conversation, this interview was so important. It's pointing us through the material world, saying there's more to life than just the material. Now, of course, they're approaching it through psychedelics. I approach it through the Bible, through my relationship with Jesus.
That you're somehow or another connected to this, but our monkey bodies will not allow us to see it, because to survive, you can't really live in that realm. For most of human history, if you wanted to survive, you had to be a barbarian.
Okay. Our monkey bodies won't allow us. And this, again, is if your worldview doesn't line up with reality, then you have to change your worldview. I don't think evolution is a very good explanation for what we see. Certainly, species adapt over time. I get that. But it doesn't explain everything. It certainly doesn't explain the things that are outside of the material world. What I think Joe is moving towards is this idea. We are made to worship. We are made to connect with God. And my encouragement to you on your journey, as I go on my own journey, is how do you worship? How do you connect with God? That is one of the most important things about you. So I encourage you to take that very serious. We are made to worship. St. Augustine said, "You have made me for yourself, and my heart is restless until it finds rest in you." That, I think, is what's going on here. We're restless until we come back into connection with God. And unfortunately, that restlessness drives some people to find things that they think are other pathways, but I don't think that they're leading to what you are hoping that they're leading towards. I'm going to find one last spot. So this is part of the Joe Rogan and Blaire White interview that turns into the conversation of the Dead Sea Scrolls and Christianity and the potential for like psychedelics to have been an influence in the Christian religion. I may separate these two. I may release it as one full video. I don't exactly know at this point. So I will dedicate some more time into researching this, but before we go into this next part, I just wanted to say that I don't know a ton. I don't really know much about the guy that Joe Rogan's about to mention, but I will give you my thoughts as of today, and then I will do some more research, and I'll come back and I'll give a more full answer to this. So let's get into it.
Fear, and it's a weird religious thing too, because like in the Bible, you know, homosexuality in the Old Testament is frowned upon, but so is eating shellfish.
Right.
So is wearing 2 different types of cloth.
And you're supposed to stone your kids if they talk back.
Oh,
I don't think conservatives really do that.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a whole New Testament to be considered in that conversation.
A lot of in the Bible that's very wacky, but they concentrate on the gay one.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that's really wacky. Welcome to the Strange Theology podcast. I completely agree.
For some, I mean, I don't know what it, maybe back in the time. See, one of the major theories about the advent of Christianity has to do with psychedelic drugs. There's a guy named John Marco Allegro, and he was he was an ordained minister, and he was on the Dead Sea Scrolls translation committee, the group of people that were translating the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he was also a theologian. So he was an ordained minister, but he became agnostic over the years because he was studying religion for so long. He's like, this is all kind of crazy. Like, so he's like, I'm not gonna have any ideological perspective when it comes to religion. I'm agnostic, even though he was an ordained minister. So when he was hired, and when he was
true agnosticism isn't really possible. To be agnostic is to say I don't know, but you have to know something in order to say that you don't know. But I'm not trying to create a semantical argument here. But to say that this theologian was like free of bias, I agree. You should not be ideological. I think ideology can be the enemy of good theology. So we should approach theology as best we can from an unbiased perspective, knowing full well that that's not really possible. It's not really possible to be truly agnostic when it comes to this stuff. So I don't know this guy's foundation. I don't know his approach to the Dead Sea Scrolls and how he interprets it. I don't know that much about this person. And so, but to know that everybody brings some kind of bias into it. That's why it's important that the Dead Sea Scrolls are being looked at by hundreds, if not thousands of scholars. So we're not getting like just one small group of people's ideas of what it is.
Brought on as this part of one of the experts on languages to translate this, the oldest known version of the Bible. And I think it's the only version of the Bible that we have that's in Aramaic. And when he translated Dead Sea Scrolls over, I believe it was over 14 years, he wrote a book called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. And what he said was that all of this stuff that you're reading is, you know, there's translations. You're translating things from ancient Hebrew, which is a language that's based on numbers.
Right.
Like ancient Hebrew letters doubled as numbers because there was no numbers. So the letter A was also the number 1.
Yeah, well, let's not get too bogged down into the numbers and the letters, although that can be fascinating. All translation is treason. And scholars know that. Particularly the guys and girls that are going in and interpreting the Bible, translating the Bible. They go in knowing that if I'm going to take it from this language to that language, it's going to change something. So we have to be aware of that. That's why sometimes you will translate a sentence from one language into a paragraph into another to just try to describe what you're saying, to honor that text as best as you can.
So like, it's really weird, but you got to think about this, and I hope I'm not f***ing this up, but the way it was explained to me was
I
that
appreciate
language
Joe there.
in ancient Hebrew had numerical value. That words had numerical value, like the word love and the word God. They had the same numerical value. Like
This is actually one of the reasons why you can that actually lends to some of the credibility of translating Hebrew. From what I understand, is that it's actually easy to catch a mistake. It's not like that makes it easier to make a mistake. It's actually easier to catch the mistakes that might be taking place if you're copying a scroll over and over and over again. Again, I'm just kind of like a coffee shop theologian. One person that you could, there's all kinds of stuff out there for. I will try to find good research material for you if you want to look further into languages and things like that. But I do appreciate Joe just saying, hey, I hope I'm not messing this up here. Like, he's aware of, like we all should be, and hopefully I am, that we're getting towards the end of our knowledge and our comfort zone, and we kind of say, hey, I hope I'm not misrepresenting this here. Actually, I appreciate that.
Using these words in the certain, like the way you would place the letters in the same, it was because it had a number value to it that we don't think of when it gets translated to Greek, into Latin, to English.
Yeah.
And so he read this all these years, and he came to the conclusion that this is all a misunderstanding, and that our version of what Christianity is. It's a crazy book. I have multiple copies of it, and I have original copies of it because it was bought up. I believe it was bought up by the Catholic Church. And then a guy named Jan Irvin put it back into print a few years back.
Yeah. Okay. So he'll go into and check out this podcast. I think it's really worth it's really worth going into this. Give me a second. Hold on. I messed up my stuff here. I'm doinking around. I would encourage you to check out this part of the Joe Rogan interview with Blaire White. Again, I think it's a meaningful conversation to have. I won't go into all the stuff that he says here about the Dead Sea Scrolls and this guy. I will mention two things, though. One, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in these caves in Qumran, and they were preserved by a group of people called the Essenes. And again, I'm going to do more research on this, and I think that's a cool thing about dialogue, is that when you come across new information that you need to be refreshed on, particularly this guy's work is not something that I have come into contact with before, but I am familiar to some degree with the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff like that. So good dialogue should cause you to do more thinking and more research. And I hope we realize this is not a response video to Joe Rogan and Blaire White. This is a video. The motivation behind this video is to create good dialogue around meaningful things. It's not a response video. I don't like those, and I hate that this is kind of a response video. I hate that I'm even close to that. Qumran Essenes, just because you found the Dead Sea Scrolls next to other texts that were also being preserved by this group of people, that does not mean that the Old Testament or the Bible in general, with the Old Testament and the New Testament, teaches all these things. He goes into like how Christianity is about fertility rituals and all this other stuff. That's not Christianity. That might have been found near some Dead Sea Scrolls of the Old Testament, right? That doesn't mean that the Bible teaches those things. It's just that this group of people were preserving all kinds of ancient documents. So that's the first thing is you can't impart this group, this group of people called the Essenes, as though this is what Christianity teaches. There's a lot of different kind of flavors of Christianity, for good or for ill. And so one group, this Essenes, doesn't represent all Christian tradition. And you have to look at the text itself. That's the main point. You can't look at the group that preserved the text. You have to read the text itself. And the Bible does not teach that we are a fertility religion. Okay, that's just not in the text. As Christians, we take the authority of Scripture very seriously, and we don't mix it with just the beliefs of other groups and then say, okay, this is what it is. It's Scripture. Scripture is the authority for all matters of life and faith. So if you don't find it in Scripture, you can't tell me that that's part of the Christian religion. It's just not. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there are a lot of scholars that have looked at the Dead Sea Scrolls. Hundreds, maybe even thousands, probably thousands. So you can't take the testimony of one scholar. Anytime one person comes up and says, oh, you know what, all this stuff about Christianity, it's just been a big misunderstanding. You know, Joseph Smith did that. Like, cult leaders do that. Okay, that's why Christianity has withstood the test of time, because we are a community of believers. It's not just one person. I mean, obviously it's Jesus. Yes, we're pointing to one person, Jesus, but not one religious figure that we then follow like a cult leader. Except maybe, I guess, if you consider Jesus the cult leader. Okay, I'm getting distracted. We're not following this guy, one theologian, let's say one theologian's interpretation of Scripture. Thanks for sticking around as I distracted myself with the idea that Christianity is not a cult. So that's it. The Essenes were one group. They do not represent all of Christianity. Christianity is fundamentally represented by the texts of Scripture. So you have to go to the texts themselves, not the group or the community. And likewise, you can't go to one theologian. You have to look at all these theologians and how they've interpreted or looked at the Old Testament, the Dead Sea Scrolls specifically. The amazing things about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I'm kind of going on a little bit of a rant there, so apologize, but they're like available. You can go online and look at this. I'll provide a link for that because I think that's amazing. So they're available to everyone. It's not like one guy suddenly had this amazing realization that everybody's been wrong for centuries. That's not the way it goes. It might be interesting. I might even read that guy's book, but again, you take it with the thousands of years of history and the hundreds and thousands of theologians who have been reading Scripture, and the fact that Scripture is available to everyone. So anytime one person says this is the one way to look at it, like a Joseph Smith or like a theologian, obviously if it's the person of Jesus saying that, it's a little different. So I hope that this creates good dialogue. It's been a long one, and I think the reason that this is long is because it should be. Theology should be something that takes time, that moves slowly, even though at times you might have an aha moment, and I hope that you have had those. Thanks for hanging in there with me. You could tell I'm getting a little tired at the end of this one, so my outro is we're getting long here. But again, if you've found this video, if you've made it this far into this video, welcome to the community, because certainly the last 2 or 3 minutes of this has been probably agonizing for most people. And the reason this channel exists is to create meaningful dialogue around the Christian worldview as it cameos in popular culture. And as I listen to this interview with Joe Rogan and Blaire White, I'm realizing that they are touching on something. It's like they're getting close. They're getting close. They're getting close. They may not quite touch. They may not quite be drawn to the person of Jesus, who is the door, who is the only way for us to be full of God, is the only way for us to come back into communion with God. But man, if it's not close, right? And I have to give credit where credit's due. But close, having partial truth is not having all truth. So we need to continue the discussion. We need to continue the dialogue. So thanks for being here to the end. Catch you in the next one.